So we are going to start working on our project for fall of 2024. And the purpose of this video is to go through the details of the PDF that explains what I expect from you for your code. So let's first go ahead and read the basics together, and I'll explain things as I go along, and I'll show you the outputs of code when we do this. So the goal of this project is to simulate a dice rolling game where the player's objective is to achieve the highest score possible. The player will be able to visualize the rolling dice and interact with MATLAB to achieve the highest number of points. In addition to the code, you will also submit a written report that describes the logic behind the different aspects of the code. So you'll type something and you'll explain in words how your code is working conceptually to me, to make sure that you show me that you understand what you are doing. Here's the general schematic of the dice. We have 3 dice, and depending on the value of the dice that you'll roll, it could be a 1, a 2, or a 3. They have 3 dice with possible values of 1, 2, or 3. Now, in regards to the game, there may be several rounds, and for each round, the player will have 2 rolls to achieve the best score possible. So if they say they want to play 2 rounds, they would roll the dice. They'll select some dice to hold. We'll talk about that. They'll roll the second time, tabulate their score. That's the end of round 1. Then we will re-roll the dice. All of them have options to choose to save or to keep. We'll roll a second time for those dice, and that's the end of round 2. So each round consists of rolling 2 times. So the general gameplay is the player rolls all the dice. You'll see the number on each dice change during the roll and it ultimately stops. So when you plot your figures, you should be able to see this 1 change to a 2 or to a 3 or whatever is just cycling through. If you think about like a slot machine, maybe you see the animations changing until it stops on a certain value. After the dice stop, the player will select dice to hold, meaning they are happy with dice 2 and 3. They want those to stay, and then they will re-roll only dice 1. So for example, assume the dice are 3, 1, 3. They may select the 3s because they can try to get 3 of a kind. So 3 and 3, we would tell them to hold, and this 1 would be re-rolled, and we visualize that re-rolling. And ultimately, you would hope maybe for 3, 3, 3, for example. So the unheld dice are rolled. For example, above this example, the middle dice will re-roll so we can visualize it while the held dice remain fixed. So we still see the 3s on the screen, but they're not changing. After the second roll, the player selects their options for how they score it. We'll talk about scoring shortly. And if there's more than one round, after the player selects how they want to score it, they will go ahead and watch their dice roll again because the next round would start after they scored until they've played the amount of rounds that they select. So let's talk about the initial user inputs. So the user will interact with the software to provide inputs. The first being if they want to see the rules or not. So let's come up to the code, which I've scooted down so we don't see anything. But if I run this, you'll see, hi, welcome to, in this case, the Fracas Dice game. You'll call it something for yourself. Come up with a name that's fun for you. It says to see the rules, type 1, otherwise type 0. So this is what I mean. They will input if they want to see the rules or not. So if they type a number that isn't 1 or 0, let's say I type 3, it says invalid entry because it has to be 1 or 0. If I type 0, you see that it goes to the next question. I'll do Control-C to end this code. Clear, and we'll start over. Let's say I type 1 for the rules. And now these rules are outputted to the screen. And over here, you'll see that I've provided these rules in the document. You can essentially copy and paste those, but I want them to look pretty. Basically, you can't just do this giant paragraph because it might end up looking kind of disorganized. You have to figure out a way to do that nice and easy. And just to kind of, again, to summarize, the goal of the game is to achieve the highest score possible. You'll determine the number of rounds to play. In each round, you will roll 3 die. After the roll, you can hold certain die. This means that they won't be rolled again. You will roll the unheld die 1 more time. And then after that final roll, you will choose how your score is saved. So the four options for a score are straight, meaning it's three numbers in a row, straight. So 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 3, 3, 1, 2. Any combination of the dice that form the combination of 1, 2, 3. That's a straight. And we see if they get a straight, they get a bonus of 2 points. Two of a kind is self-explanatory. I might have 1, 1, 2, for example. That's two ones that are matching, with the third dice being different. Three of a kind is all the dice match. And chance is just kind of a backup. You'll see as we get further that you can only do one of these options once. So let's say the first time I roll, I get a straight. And then in the next round, I roll a straight again. Well, I can't use that because I already filled in the straight. So maybe I'd use chance to get some points. Now your score for each turn is the sum of the dice plus the bonus. So three of a kind is fancier, you know. That's probably the most exciting thing to get in a game like this. You get them to match. You'll get a bonus of 3 points. So you'll add the dice up. So if I have 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3 adds to 9. That's the sum of the dice. Plus the extra bonus, which in this case would be 3. That'd be a total of 12 points added to their score. If they do a straight, it'll be the sum of the dice, which will always be 6. Add 2, the straight will always give you 8 points. And two of a kind will be the sum of the dice. So if I do 2, 2, 3, that's 2 plus 2 plus 3 is 7. Plus the bonus of 1 is 8. So your score for each turn is the sum of the dice plus the bonus. When the round ends, you repeat the process building upon your score. So essentially, after the round ends, you'll roll again until you've played the right amount of rounds, which we see here. The next thing that pops up is they input how many rounds they want to play for, and you choose between 1 and 4. So if I were to select 5, that is invalid. If I were to select 0, you see that it just keeps telling me like, hey, you haven't entered anything correct yet because I'm only allowing you to do rounds 1 to 4. So let's say I do 3 rounds. I've given a number that's between 1 and 4, an integer that's between 1 and 4. And then they will have to input what color they want their dice to be. So it says select 1 for red, 2 for blue, or 3 for computer's choice. So let's say I do 4. That's invalid. It doesn't work because, again, it's not 1, 2, or 3. Maybe I'll do 2 for blue. And what I'll do is I'll come here so we can watch it. So once we select the option for our color, let's say I click 2, we should see our dice figure show up. And we see that the dice are changing in this animation. Once the dice stop moving, this says done rolling. We alert the user that the dice are finished. And then we ask, which dice do you want to keep? Enter 1 at a time, type 0 to roll remaining die. And that's the next aspect of the game. After you roll once, you select the die you want to keep. So let's come look at the rules about the die themselves. So it says the dice are positioned horizontally. So if you look, you see they're going from left to right. Each die is a square, and each die is separated from a nearby boundary by a gap distance. So I say dice gap is separating all of the dice from nearby things. Other dice are the walls of the figure. So if we look at the table where I tell you what the gap is 0.5. You see that this wall is 0.5 away. This wall is 0.5 away from the bottom. There's 0.5 in between the two dice and 0.5 from the top. So the dice are 0.5 away from every nearby boundary. And it says the dice width is 1. If we come look at the drawing, we see that the dice width is 1. These are square die, so it's 1 and 1. We see that this is 1 across and that this is 1 up. Now, these kind of look like rectangles in this picture because this is just a consequence of the axis and the way the window looks. So if I do it like this, they look more like squares. If I compress it, they look more like rectangles. This is not a big deal if they look more rectangular. I don't want you to stress about setting the axes a certain way. to get them to be perfectly square. It's okay. You see that the limits here between 0 and 5 and 0 and 2. I forget if I included that. I'm going to include that. But this is what we want, the dice to be 1 by 1 and separated by 0.5 from everything else. Even include this here, it's very important to note your dice may not look square. This is the consequence of the axes limit, so do not stress that they look more like dominoes than actual dice. As long as the dimensions match the ticks on the axis, meaning I see that this dice width is 1 across because it's between 0.5 and 1.5. This one's between 2 and 3 and so on. As long as that makes sense, you're good. You don't need to stress about it. Figure 3, which is this figure, shows the positioning of the dots on your die. So we see that for a dice when it's a 1, that the dot is shown halfway across the dice. Because remember, the width is this dimension here. And I'm saying go halfway across and halfway up. And that's where we'll plot the dice right in the center. For the blue dice, or not, for the number 2 dice, I have blue here to differentiate from this. But for the case where you have 2 dice, where you have these dots more kind of near the corners, you should have them being a quarter of the width inwards from each edge. So if we come look at this, we can see here, this is at 3. This is centered at 2.75. A quarter of 1 is a quarter. This is at 2.75. If you look at the y-axis, we see that this is at 0.5. And then if we were to go up to 0.75, that's where this dice is 0.25 from each boundary. This dice is the same, except it's 0.25 from the top and from the left. So that's how the second dice works. And when it's 3, it's a combination of those two. So we see that the corner dot or the quarter dots are at the same position as the 2, and the center dots at the same position as the 1. So we're just basically combining what those two are. So I give you this table with those dimensions. I hope that that is clear. Now, after the player has provided all of their initial inputs, a figure should pop up with the 3 dice. The dots on the dice should change until a certain amount of time has passed. That's what I just showed you. The dots are changing in the figure for a while until they stop. My dice roll roughly 30 times with a pause of 0.1 seconds between each roll. So that's what I chose. I don't require this. I'm not going to be timing it. I'm not going to take a stopwatch out and count it or whatever. But when we're grading, we just have to make sure we see the animation, a sufficient amount, where I think this is a pretty good area. You can mess with it if you'd like. I said you can stick with that or do whatever you want, whatever you feel is best, but there has to be some sort of visualization showing the dice changing. Once the dice are done rolling, the command window will say done rolling. We see that right here. It says it's done rolling. And then ask the user which dice they want to keep and hold, or /hold. Keep and hold are the same as shown in the example below. They will enter any of the numbers 1 to 3 to hold those dice, where the value of 1 corresponds with the leftmost dice, a value of 2 corresponds with the center, and a value of 3 corresponds with the rightmost dice. So if you look here, I can select which dice I want to hold. First off, if I type a number that's not 1, 2, or 3, it tells me it's an invalid entry. That's the first thing. Second, let's say I want to go ahead and hold dice 2 and 3. So I type 2 to hold this center die. It says, do you want to roll or do you want to hold other die? And maybe I'm trying to get 3 of a kind with the 2s. So yeah, I'll try to hold the 2, the third one. So I could do that. And at this point, I don't want to hold the 1. I should type 0 to let them roll again. But something you have to account for is that if the user typed in the 3 again, it should say that it's already stored. Try again. If I type in a 2, it says it's already stored. Basically, you're telling them, hey, you already stored these die. Why are you wasting your time typing them? So during this step, I'm going to reiterate here, the user will choose which numbers they want to hold. They can choose what dice they want to hold in any order. So they do not need to go from left to right. That decision I just made, I could have done 3 and then 2, which would still work exactly the same. Let me show that to make sure that that is clear. So if I display, we will listen to the rules. We'll play for, again, 3 rounds. I'll do red this time, and you can see the dice have changed to a different color. Wow, I got the same exact roll. That's wild. So let's say I want to hold dice 2 and 3 again. I can do 3 first and then 2. And the code should work exactly the same, regardless of the order that I enter the dice. And again, if I go ahead and try to do 2 and 3 again, you see it's already stored. So for example, if they type 3, click enter, type 1, click enter, and then type 0 to re-roll the second dice, it should work the same exact way if they type 1 first and then 3. So in this sentence, I type 3 and then 1. If I do 1 and then 3, it should work exactly the same way. If they type 0 immediately, it means they want to re-roll all 3 dice. Remember, the 0 says to re-roll any dice that you haven't selected to hold. So if I just type 0 right away, I haven't held any of the dice. So therefore, all 3 of them should roll, which we can show. Let's go ahead and show that again. Don't want to hear the rules. We'll do 3 rounds. We'll do computer's choice. Let's say I just do 0. I haven't selected any dice to hold. If I click this, you see that all 3 dice are re-rolling right now. If they enter all 3 numbers, then the dice shouldn't roll at all. So let's see what that looks like. If I go ahead and run this, again, we'll just go through it quickly. Let's computer choice, change the color. Let's say I want to hold all the dice. 1, I can change in the order if I want, 3 and 2. So I'm holding all the dice. You'll see that none of them are rolling. And then it'll just go ahead and show you what you currently have. If they type a number that isn't 0 to 3, it should give them an invalid entry. We already talked about that. If they type a number twice, MATLAB should display that the number is already stored. We already talked about that. And after entering 0, the non-held dice will roll again, which is what I just showed. I typed 0. Any dice that weren't held are rolled again and animated again. Okay, so scoring. After rolling the dice twice, which is just what we did in a round, MATLAB will output the scoring options. The options are shown in table 2. So I give you some examples of 3 and a kind, 2 of a kind, etc. Chance could be anything. It's the sum of the dice. So if we look at what we have, I have 1, 1, 2. MATLAB will tell me, based on your code, what are your options. So option 1 is related to a straight. In this case, I don't have a straight. If selected, you add 0 points. We'll talk about why shortly. I do have 2 of a kind. I have the 2 ones. So the sum of the dice is 4. 1 plus 1 plus 2. You get a bonus of 1 for 2 of a kind, and that means you add 5 to your total score. Option 3 would be for 3 of a kind. There is no 3 of a kind here because I don't have 3 of the same value. So therefore, we wouldn't add any points if we selected this. And chance is our sum of the die, which in this case is just 4 with no bonus. You'd add 4 to your score. And it says which option do you want to pick? You would pick one of those options. So users select one option after each round. Again, where one round is when you roll the dice twice. Once an option is selected, it cannot be selected in other rounds. So for example, if I roll 3 of a kind in the first round, I am not able to use that option in the later rounds. Let's see that. So if we look, let's say I do option 4 for chance. Once I say the option I want, the next round is going to start. So watch, I'm going to click 4, and now it's rolling the dice again, and it says now starting round 2. And I'll go through this again, which dice do I want to keep? Maybe I'll keep 2 and 3 this time. You can see in this situation, only this one is re-rolling. And if you look, remember that earlier we said we chose option 4 for chance. If you see option 4 now, it is no longer available. You cannot do that option if you've already done it. So what that means is you have to choose from one of the 3 remaining options. This is where this whole idea of 0 points matters. So let's say I didn't have 2 of a kind. Let's say I had something else. Or maybe I had a situation, which I don't think is possible with the fact we only have 3 values. But maybe, you know what? Maybe what we'll do is we will go ahead and actually just say I'm going to do 2 of a kind here and let round 3 go. I'm going to do this again just to kind of illustrate. Let's say I store dice 1 and 3. I'm going to hope that I don't get this to be a 3, of course. But if I didn't get a 3 there, I couldn't do a 3 of a kind. I couldn't do 2 of a kind because I already did it. I couldn't do chance because I already didn't. So if I didn't have 3 of a kind here, both of these options would not be valid. So I have to sacrifice one of them before I move to the next round. This is how Yahtzee works, is that if you have no other options, you have to basically sacrifice one and then say you have 0 points. So let's say I chose option 1. I think I did 3 rounds, so this game's going to end. I actually don't want to do it yet. But if I did option 1 instead of 3, I would end up not adding 0. And then on the following round, this would say it's no longer available. So if the user doesn't have any viable options, they can select an available one and add 0 points. So for example, if the user got a straight in round 1, they are not allowed to use that option again. That's the first thing. They've added 8 points to their score from the straight, 1 plus 2 plus 3, plus the bonus of 2, 8. And now they have done that in round 1. For the remaining time of the game, they cannot use that again. So in round 2, they end up with a straight again. They decide to use chance as a safety option to get points. So instead of using straight, which they're not able to do, they will use chance, which will give them an additional score based on the sum of the dice, which is 6. So they don't get a bonus because the straight is already full, but they'll still get 6 points. Then in round 3, they roll the straight a third time. In this situation, there are no options at their disposal. They have straight, 2 of a kind, 3 of a kind chance. If they have used the straight and they've used the chance, the 2 in the kind and 3 of a kind are not available for them to make any points. So now there are no options except for 2 of a kind and 3 of a kind. They must select one and gain 0 points for that round. Your code should output all possible options and what scores they would add. This includes adding 0 points like above. This also includes saying that an option is no longer available. So we see here that this option is no longer available. If I choose 4, you see that it's an invalid entry because we cannot use it anymore. If I do 2, we see it's an invalid entry. I cannot use it anymore because we already used it in the earlier rounds. If I do 5, that's definitely an invalid entry. The only options I have are 1 to 4. So then I have to select one of these others. Maybe I'll do 3. And now I'm going to round 4. I did 4 rounds. Now we can at least look. Let's see. The only thing that I have at my disposal that I can use, because I don't have 2 and 3, or 2 and 4. I just did 3. We only have 1. So let's try to get it straight. So maybe I'll hold dice 1 and 2. That's this dice with the 3 and that dice was the 1. I hope I roll a 2 here. Let's see if I roll a 2. I didn't. I'm in trouble. I have to pick an option at the end of the game, so I would pick option 1. And at that point, the game is over. So the command window output below is an example for round 2 where I rolled 2, 2, 1. That was just an example. In round 1, I rolled a straight, so option 1 is no longer available in round 2. Remember, this 2, 2, 1 is for round 2. Let's assume I rolled a straight in round 1. This option is no longer available. In round 2, I got 2 of a kind, so option 2 is now a possibility. 2 of a kind, sum of a dice is 5, 2, 2, 1. With the bonus of 1, a total of 6 to your score. I do not have a 3 of a kind, so if I choose it, I don't add any points. Okay, no 3 of a kind. If selected, you add 0. I can also do option 4, chance as a backup to add my sum of dice without any bonus. User enters a number 1 to 4 with their option. If it's a different number, they will receive an invalid entry display and try again. If it's an option that's already been used, they will receive an invalid entry display as well. After they enter in their scoring option, their current score is shown. And we scroll back up. It says your current score is 12. Now starting round 3. Your current score is 24. Now starting round 4. It tells you what your current score is. And then it also tells you that you're starting the next round, which will basically be an indicator that the dice are starting to roll. They should basically roll immediately after it says now starting round 4. All the dice will re-roll, and the procedure begins again until all rounds are played. After the game is over, the user will see one final display that congratulates them for playing and shows their total number of points. That's what we just saw here. Game over. Congratulations, you scored 24 points. Note that I don't have something that says like round 5 is starting. That has to be coded appropriately. Once the game is over, it's over. You don't want to have something saying now starting whatever round when the game is over. It's extra. You don't want that. You want this to be nice and smooth. So, some important things. You are not allowed to use any MATLAB functions that we haven't discussed in class. I do not want you to use any sort of thing that MATLAB may have to offer with animating. We haven't talked about that. The only thing I want you to do is anything in node sets 1 to 6. So no movie animated things that MATLAB can do, no fancy things, simply everything we have seen in node sets 1 to 6. It is possible with just 1 to 6. With the exception of one function that I don't have in the notes, which is CLF, this clears the figure. So basically, let's say I just go ahead and I'm going to clear, I'm going to close. I'll just make a new thing. CLC to clear the command window. Let's say I do, I don't know, x is equal to, I don't know, 0, 1 or something. Y is equal to x squared by x comma y. If I plot that, you see here's the figure. Sorry. Let's say there's the figure. Let's dock it so we can see it. If I type CLF, actually, maybe I won't dock it so we can see this. Making a mess here. Sorry, guys. Let's undock. Okay. If we see the figure, and if I type CLF, you'll see that the figure doesn't close, just the contents of the plot disappear. So let's show that again. If I run this, if I close, you'll see that this window goes away. But if I do CLF, the window does not go away, just the figure does. That, or just the plot does. That might be useful for you in your code. And that's something we didn't explicitly talk about. Additionally, as I shown before, you need a welcome message for your code. So let's go ahead and clear everything. We'll close. We'll run this. You see I have a hi, welcome to the game type of thing. You can call whatever you want. You can have any sort of message that you'd like, but something that shows that you are considerate of the player. Like, hey, welcome to the game. And I say, come up with the name of your own game. Regarding your report, what I would like you to do is to have a report that first starts with an introduction of the assignment. So basically saying this assignment involves rolling dice or playing this game, whatever. If you want to explain the rules a little bit, that's fine. Just explaining the introduction. I want you to describe how your code works logically. So you can include portions of your code, any resulting figures or command window text, anything that can help get your point across as to what the code is doing. I want you to organize it into sections. So if you think about my report, like my project prompt, I have something for plotting dice. I have something for rolling dice, for scoring. Maybe you want to separate into sections like that. Whatever you think is useful, but it should be organized and not just like this one giant wall of text. It should be something that is easy to read and understand from the TA's perspective or from my perspective. The last thing I want you to do is conclude with how the project went. Explain. Was this challenging for you? Was it easy? Which parts were the easiest? Which parts were the most challenging? Do you feel like you learned coding better through this project? I think out of everything in this class, this is the opportunity to really get to know how to code efficiently and understand and put your logic to the test. So I'm hoping that the answer to this question is yes. And if it's not, that's okay. Just tell me in that conclusion. In regards to grading, you'll have 110 points available to you. And it'll be graded out of 100, basically meaning there's 10 points of extra credit in general. That's awesome. So if there's something you can't figure out, I don't know how to change the color of my dice, or I don't know how to hold certain die, something, that may not harm you as badly as you think. Now, of course, major things like holding dice will probably be worth more points compared to like not being able to figure out the computer's choice for what the color of the dice are. So again, consider that depending on how important it is for the functionality of the game, that's where your points will come from. Note that the report will be 20 points out of the possible 110, so 90 points are devoted to your code. So you have a perfect code that does everything that you want it to do, and then you don't want to submit the report, that's cool. You get a 90 out of 100. It's pretty good. It's still an A. The big thing, though, is that if you have an instance of your code where it's not supposed to do something or it does something that it isn't supposed to do, that's where you'll end up losing points. I will have a massive spreadsheet where I will try to break your code. And the TAs will go ahead and download your code. You need to submit that as well, along with the PDF of your report, the file of the code, not a Word document, the M file. When you submit that, we will run your code and try to break it. And if it breaks, you didn't account for something that you shouldn't have. Now, some recommendations. First recommendation, make sure you understand the prompt of the project. Make sure you read this document thoroughly. And if you're watching this, you're already doing this next step. You're watching the video I posted to YouTube. Come leverage me. If you have any questions, leverage the TAs for help. Second, develop a general game plan. Just on paper, like how would I take in user information? What is like the idea for that? How do you animate the dice rolling? How do you keep score? Conceptual things. And again, you don't need to do this all at once. I don't want you to be like, okay, I need to get to the animation next. Like, this is a 7-week project. We break it up into bite-sized portions and do it over time. If you do this all the last week, you are not going to have fun. It's going to suck. Start early. And I even give you a general schedule on what you should do. So I recommend splitting the project up into parts. So for week 1, which is when I'm recording this video, it's introductory stuff. Learn how to collect user information for the first roll. If they mess up, how do you ask them again? Hoping something's in your mind right now about you ask them a question, they respond. Depending on the answer, it'll ask them again, or it'll move on to the next question. Hopefully that's not too challenging. And then I want you to try plotting a die, just one of them. No animation, just plotting, making sure you understand how to plot. And I tell you I recommend trying to plot with the different variations. So if there's 1 dot or 2 dots or 3 dots, how do you get those positioned properly? Just simply a static figure that isn't moving. That's what I want you to try to figure out in this first week. And once you understand this, you can expand the 3 dice later. But this first week, introductory stuff. Try to understand what the logic is. For week 2, I think that you work on rolling a single die. How do you make the dots look like they are changing? Additionally, how do you store that information? Obviously, their values, their final value is really important. So how do you store that information? For week 3, I recommend now expanding what you've done with 1 die into 3 die. So instead of having just 1 die, you go ahead and plot 3 die, and you set up the code to animate all 3 dice rolling. And begin working on the concept of holding certain die. And again, this should include all the exceptions that we discussed already in this video and in the document, and we come back up to what I'm referring to. What I mean is, here, they'll choose what numbers to hold. Make sure that you abide by these things here. Making sure that if they ask for a different number that isn't 1 to 3, like ask for 7, you give them an error. If they try to store the same number twice, you tell them that's already stored. You have to try again. I think that you start working on that during week 3, just beginning on that concept, getting a feel for it, starting to generate ideas. For week 4, continue on holding, ensuring that the dice are being held properly when you code it. And then begin working on how do you actually re-roll the dice? How do I get 1 dice that is held to not change while the others are changing? I think that this is probably the hardest part of the project, this concept of holding and re-rolling. So mess around with it. See what happens. Fool around and find out. The more you practice and the more you're messing around, the more you will learn, which is the goal. Again, I know that so many people are focused about the grades, but you will use MATLAB in several other classes moving forward. And your ability to use it will make your later college career that much easier. So take this seriously and don't just like, oh, it works for this reason. Like it works because I just added a one or something. Understand why. And you can kind of get to the answer that you want by messing around. So make sure you're doing that type of thing. On week 5, I say to keep working on re-rolling. Because of how difficult I think this part is, you'll have to keep working on this for an extra week probably and ensure that all the aspects of re-rolling are working as you expect. Week 6, you work on scoring. Make sure that scoring works as expected and you are outputting the proper options to the user that they can choose. So like we showed before, which I don't have, but just go ahead and just do one round. We'll do blue. My ugly dice. Let's say I just hold dice 1 and 2. Then I roll the third one. This type of thing should pop up that is applicable to what your dice show. So this is 3, 3, 2. This is a 2 of a kind situation. So we see that we don't have a straight. We see we have 2 of a kind. I output their score. This is the sum of the dice. This is the bonus they get. There is no 3 of a kind, and they can do chance. That needs to be set up properly. And again, that includes like in the situation. Well, I guess not yet. Including multiple rounds itself for week 7 isn't too challenging. But the part that maybe I would actually move this up to week 6, I might do that and post a V2, is making sure that your options roll as expected. So if I choose option 4 with 1 round, it's fine. That works. But now when I include multiple rounds, I have to consider I already did chance. I need to say this isn't available anymore. Things that we already discussed when we went through the code. So incorporate multiple rounds. I'll move up to week 6. The concept of just adding multiple rounds is not that difficult, but the scoring becomes a little bit more challenging once you start including multiple rounds. So I might take this out too because it is kind of challenging. So in that final week, make sure everything works as planned, write your final report, and submit on December 4th by 11:59. That's when this project is due. So I say here in the final detail, 7 weeks is a long time. Do not let that time slip. Compared to the projects I've given in the class in the past, this is the hardest one. I think it is. You'll submit the M file of your working code. I tell you not to submit a MATLAB live file. I don't want that. It's annoying to deal with sometimes. I want you to submit the PDF of your report. And I want your M file to be in this format below, where you have your last name, your first name, and then the project. And the reason why is that when we download a lot of them, it's easier to tell whose is whose if that's the situation. So please make sure you do that. I will take off a point if you don't do this because that makes our lives harder. Do not make our lives harder. That's very frustrating. I say here that if you're late by 15 minutes, I'm taking off 25 points right off the bat. 30 minutes, half your grade is gone. 45 minutes, 75 points are gone. And remember, I'm still grading it. So you might lose 75 points versus a penalty, but depending on your score, you might just lose more than 75. I'm still going to grade your project. The moral is do not submit it late. It's a professionalism thing. In the real world, you will have deadlines, you will have assignments, you will have reports, you will have whatever you think it is, an experiment upcoming that you need to get done and prepare for. You have to be efficient with your time. And I'm trying to ingrain that in your minds now. So I do not want you to email me saying, oh, it's 11:30, the night it's due. I can't submit it because Canvas is crashing. That's not a good excuse. Make sure you get this in early that day if you're waiting till the last minute to account for any issues. So don't wait till the last minute. So I give you this little checklist here. These are just some major highlights. Like, do you have a welcome message? Do you accept proper inputs, rules for rounds, for colors? Do you output invalid entry messages when needed? That's basically applicable to the whole code. Anytime the user interacts with the code, you have to make sure that you tell them it's invalid. Do you plot the dice properly? Do you allow the color to work for your dice? So if I say red and it ends up being blue, that's a point off. You have to code for that. Does your rolling animation work properly? Do you display the things I told you to display, like done rolling and now starting round 2? Can you hold die properly? Does your reroll code work properly? Do you compute scores in the right way with bonuses? Are the scoring options provided to the players? Again, note the idea of invalid entries comes in there because if they already did something in the first round, they have to they must not be able to use that number again the second time they have access to it. So if they roll 2 straights in a row, in a row, we're using roll a lot. If they get 2 straights in a row, that second straight cannot be marked down as a straight. They already filled that spot. Does your game work for multiple rounds? Does it output your final score at the end? Does it output your final or your current score as the rounds go on? Again, these are major highlights. The other details in the project document, so make sure you understand what you need to do. And I would go through this document and make sure, did I do this correctly? Check, check, check. I did that. I did that. I'm confused by this. I need to work on this some more. That will help you in the long run. So make sure that you are doing this in a timely manner, writing out your ideas on paper, get a whiteboard, draw a flow chart, things that might help you understand where should I put my if statements? Do I need a for loop here? Do I need a while loop here? Do I want to plot here? Do I want to clear the figure here? Those types of things are really important to understand conceptually. And I think doing that will help you in the long run. So I'm hoping that this is fun. I think it's cool. In the past, students were really happy once the code was done. They weren't as happy when they were writing it because it's difficult for the other projects. But once it was done, a lot of them were proud of themselves. A lot of them put on their resume, I wrote a code that launches projectiles or that builds houses. It shows some good logical knowledge and good logical techniques in regards to programming. And so I hope that you think of this as a fun but challenging project for you that you'll really grow from. If you have any questions, please come talk to me or the TAs, and we'll be happy to help. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. I'll talk to you soon.